Well, hello and welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of the New Construction Marketing Podcast. I'm your host, Anya Christiana, and I'm really excited to introduce my guest for today, Christina Nicholson. Christina is a business owner of two businesses. So the first thing she's got is Media Maven, and then she's also an owner of Podcast Cloud. So I can't wait to hear all about her and what she does. So welcome to the show, Christina.
Thank you so much for having me, Anya. I'm excited to chat with you.
I am really excited to have you on. So, Christina, why don't we start things off by giving our listeners a little bit of a backstory of who you are, what you do, so we can get to know you a little bit.
Yeah, so my background is actually in TV. I was a TV reporter and anchor for 10 years. And during that time, I received a lot of pitches from people in PR, business owners who wanted more exposure in the media. They wanted us to do stories on them so they could get that publicity without spending money on advertising. But it was very clear that a lot of people sending those emails didn't understand how a newsroom worked. They were very self-serving. They thought, it was our job to just give them a free commercial. And there was a big disconnect. So when I was looking for another career, I needed a change because the news industry just does not have a flexible schedule. By that point, I had a couple of kids. So I got into PR and I made that switch. So I could just pitch people in newsrooms the way I would have wanted to be pitched in a newsroom when I worked there. So that's how I started Media Maven. I worked at a PR agency for 6 months, had a terrible boss, decided, listen, I just want to do this on my own. So I did it on my own. Over the last 6 years, I've kind of slowly started to build a team where we have an agency. I also have some resources to help people do it themselves because I know not everybody has a budget for an agency. So I have a mentoring program to help them out, but my main bread and butter is the agency. And then through that agency, Podcast Cloud kind of accidentally came along. So there's a lot of software out there that helps PR agencies and marketers find the contact information for all these journalists. Like if you want to be in Oprah magazine, you just go use this software and they'll give you all of the names, titles, contact information for everybody who works for Oprah's magazine, for example. But nothing like this existed for podcasts. I have my own podcast. Anya, you know the value of podcasts. It's a form of media where the listener is so much more engaged. They're more likely to do something after they hear somebody on a podcast or after they listen to a podcast for a while. So I said, let's make it easier to find podcasts to be a guest on. Because at this point, we were just picking up our phones and scrolling through the millions of podcasts in the app. And a lot of those podcasts, they're no longer active or, they get 1 to 2 downloads a month. They're not really worth your time. So I created a database that only includes the top podcasts in every category, like the top, I'd say 300 podcasts in every category. There's about 100 categories out there. So there's, over 20,000 podcasts in the database just to make it easy to build a pitch list. Mm-hmm. And so it's kind of like one business led to the other. To make my job easier, I needed Podcast Clout to pitch clients to be on podcasts. And when I'm not doing that, I live in South Florida with my husband and 3 kids. And I have a lifestyle blog called Christina All Day. And we just keep it fun down here. That's about it. Thank goodness for my team that I do have some free time. So I know it sounds like a lot having 2 businesses, but I have a team of people who are a lot smarter than me. So they run the things there.
That's amazing. That's awesome. So I love that you're working smarter, not harder. And having a team is, of course, a big part of that. So it sounds like with your business, you saw the first one, it's kind of okay, personal experience. You saw the problem and you were like, okay, I can definitely create a solution for that. And the second one was almost like solving a problem for yourself to make your life easier. So I love that. Most of successful businesses come from that problem solving. So you mentioned that, when people were pitching you, they didn't want to spend money on advertising and they thought that, hey, if I just get on TV or, be featured in Oprah magazine, then whatever I'm selling is just going to sell itself out. So is that the case? Does that actually work?
Sometimes that's the case, but rarely that's the case. and a lot of people think that's what's going to happen, and they'll want to hire PR for like a month or two just to like get famous and call it a day. That is not how that happens. I tell people PR is like SEO. You can't just do it for a month or two and call it a day. Like, you have to do this long term. The idea is you're building a brand, so you're always going to be top of mind. So when people need your services or they want to buy your product, they know who to go to because they've seen you and they've heard of you in so many places over a period of time. Now, I will say, sometimes I had a client a few months ago, they were on the Today Show. Obviously, the following days from being on the Today Show, their sales of their product were through the roof because millions of people just learned about them. But this was also millions of people in their demographic. They sold bracelets for women. Most people watching the Today Show are women. So it was in line with who their demographic was. But before we got them on the Today Show, we also got that product and the product's founder in a variety of media. She was in Forbes, but she was also on a lot of podcasts. She was also in a lot of roundups. She was also in a lot of local news. So all of that led to the big one. It's very rare to just get a big national one without having the small ones first. And honestly, you have to think of how you consume the media. When you see something, whether it be, on TV, you hear it on a podcast, you read it online, in 5 minutes, you're probably going to forget about it just because you're seeing so many different things since then. So that's why it's important to be consistent. Don't think you're going to be famous overnight. It's a slow and steady build. It's a long-term game. It's not a sprint.
Mm-hmm. So what I'm hearing you say is that, in order for people to buy from you and to buy consistently, not just like, the next day after the show, you need to develop that know, like, and trust factor. And that takes time for sure. And it's almost, you mentioned that you need to be kind of like omnipresent, right? Like you need to be everywhere so that they keep seeing you, they get to know you. And then it's like, okay, no brainer when it comes to thinking about a new home, who is that builder in my area that I keep seeing on the news? I keep seeing them on, maybe the ads that are being served to me through social media. I'm just seeing them organically on social media. I'm seeing them, on billboards, maybe magazines, whatever that may be. So it is, I love that you said it's like SEO. It's perfect parallel there. That's it's not one time you said it and forget it. Doesn't work like that. Yes. So when it comes to someone who's maybe like, okay, well, that sounds great. Obviously that's another avenue of exploring and getting my brand out there. And we all know the importance of building a brand. Like, how do we even get started with this? Like, what do we do?
Yeah, well, there's two things. And I'm not going to say, obviously there's three ways to get to build your brand. There's three ways to get the word out there. One of them is your own media. So your own website, your own social media. But when you do that, it's your voice. So of course you're going to say nice things about yourself. The second way is advertising. And that's paying a lot of money to basically do the same thing, say how great you are. And people know this, like they know when you're advertising, they know when it's your own social media or your own website. But when it is earned media, when it is another outlet choosing to say something about you, that's where the authority and credibility comes. So that's why it's worth so much more than those other things. Yes, those other things are nice, and you should do those other things if you have the time/budget to do them. But there's just another level of credibility and authority when you don't pay somebody else to say you're great. And to do this, I guess the quickest, easiest way, which there is no quick and easy way, but like starting out point, focus on two things. One, your local market. You are newsworthy. And again, we have to always go back to being newsworthy because it is not the media's job to promote you. It is not a podcaster's job to promote you. Like, you have to provide some kind of value. You have to be newsworthy. So if you focus on your local market, where you live, where you work, you're more newsworthy for that reason because you live there. You are a local person. So if I wanted to talk about building a business while working from home in a pandemic with kids at home, I live in South Florida, so I would be like the West Palm Beach mom who does this. Because I live here, people here would care. If I go to Columbus, Ohio, where I don't live, why would they care to talk to me? They're going to talk to somebody who lives there. So focus on your local market first. And then another tip is to focus on the news. And in the construction industry, like this is so big right now. There are so many stories that people in construction can jump on right now. I mean, you have the housing market right now, which I think everywhere in North America, you put a house on the market, it'll sell the next day for over asking price. Now, you may think that's a realtor story, which realtors should be talking about this and getting mad publicity, but it's also a construction story because there is a correlation. And I just know this personally because we went to get a quote for a fence, getting our fence repaired. And the guys that we talked to 3 different companies, and they're like, oh yeah, we can do this, but it's going to take 6 months to even start because the supplies are too expensive, or we can't get the supplies, or we're backed up with work, whatever it is. Like the industry is crazy now. And whenever you see a story in the news that has anything to do under the construction, the housing industry, you should jump on that and be like, hey, I can talk about this and I can give it this sort of angle because it's already newsworthy. People are already talking about it. So why not offer your expertise to share another angle? And to build on that, a mistake people make, whether they're pitching locally or they're jumping on news stories that are already happening, is they want to be promotional and make it all about themselves. And that is what people need to not do, because that will fall flat. Like, it's very obvious when you just want to promote yourself. And what you need to do is just help the journalists do their job. If they're doing a story about this, help them, because the promotion will always come by default. Like, they will say, so-and-so who is, the owner of this construction company says blah, 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 blah. You'll get those backlinks if it's on the internet. You'll get a TV interview if it's on TV. And then you can take that content and you can share it on your social media. You can turn that into a social media ad. You can put it on your website. And then people see that you're in the news, and then automatically they're going to think, oh, wow, this person's legit. This person's a big deal. But you're never going to get there if you aren't helping the journalists do their job.
Love this, love this. So, and I think it goes back to what you said, that you can say all the nice things about yourself, but it falls flat. It has such a better meaning, so much more weight when it comes from somebody else. And I love the idea of taking that and repurposing it, right? It's like, this may not happen to you every single day that somebody's talking about you and saying all those nice things about you. So give it its own life, right? This is where you need to start running with it instead of just, okay, it's a one story and done. Like, repurpose, reuse, like any chance you have, turn it into, like you said, the ads, have it featured on your website all over the place so people can see it. All right, so I love the information that you've talked about so far. So love the idea of a local market. So for builders out there, right? Like, you are the local heroes, and you're building the communities. And you're right, Christina, like right now, price of lumber has skyrocketed almost 300% since a year ago. So it adds about $36,000 extra to build a single family home versus at the beginning of pandemic. So that's a newsworthy story, right? People on TV, watching TV, most of them are probably thinking, oh, the housing market is booming. The greedy builders are just going home and starting, fire with $100 bills in their mind, because when most of general population watching the news, that's what they think, right? Like, oh, the prices are going up, so the builders are getting richer and richer, where the reality is not that at all. It's builders are, a lot of them are barely making profit right now because of the supply demand disruption, the supply chain disruption, and the crazy price of the goods and services as well that we're paying premium for. So this is a perfect opportunity for you to get on the local news to talk about this. Now, how do we know, like, even with local market, like, how do we start? Like, so I would think if I am in real estate, or if I'm in if I'm a builder, would I just look at maybe like even a local newspaper that has real estate section? Or how do you go about figuring out, where to go? Because again, I can imagine that big part of it is going to be, are my ideal readers actually following that publication?
Yeah, I mean, Anya, you said it perfectly. You need to go to who is covering that topic. So you are going to look at business, you're going to look at real estate, you're going to look at money. Like there's an overlap of it all. And it also depends on what angle you're pitching. If you are pitching the people think they can build a home cheaper than they can buy it right now, that's going to be real estate. If you're pitching the high cost of lumber, I mean, maybe that's even construction. Maybe some business writers write about construction. So it's really about just looking at who covers your industry or who covers your niche and coming up with that angle. You also want to look at what have they published or talked about in the last few weeks. Like, is there anything that I can say to maybe give them a different angle, or even just following them on Twitter and building a relationship that way? Like, it's so important to have some kind of knowledge of who you're reaching out to and what they write about before you actually pitch them. Because let me tell you, journalists and podcast hosts, I'm sure you see the same thing, Anya, like the emails of people pitching for free publicity is insane. You get a lot. So you want to stand out from the crowd. And the best way to do that is to build a relationship, out of their inbox. So maybe it is just commenting on their stories online because they see that. They will pay attention to that. Like we're more likely to pay attention to a social media notification today than we are another email in our inbox. So I think that's a really important thing to do. And then you also want to keep in mind, like, who is my audience? Are they watching? This is where a lot of people, they get distracted by like the big national news coverage and this and that. Like if it's not going to lead to profit, then what's the point of doing it? I mean, and different media has different forms. So for example, another client that I got on the Today Show, they were a fitness app that focused on running. Now, it's great we got them on the Today Show. That's huge for their credibility and authority. But when it comes to a direct move from publicity to profit, I'm sure there's lots of people who watch the Today Show who don't like to run. So they're not interested in the app. But when we got that client in a magazine called Runner's World, their conversion rate is going to be higher just because every single person reading that magazine is interested in running. So yeah, they could have taken that Today Show appearance, turned it into an ad on social media and targeted runners. That would have been a great thing to do. But you just have to keep, like, don't get distracted by like the bigger outlet that reaches more people. You have to really focus on who your audience is and what they're watching and what they're reading. And then reach out to that person, build a relationship, be like, hey, I'm Anya. This is what I do. I'm more than happy to help you with any future stories that you do. Let me know if you need anything, if you need me to introduce you to somebody, if you have a question, just let me know. Like before you pitch them, just try to help them. Because again, it's not their job to promote you. They're only going to include you if you can help them do their job. So just be helpful.
Yes, absolutely. And so I think that's where a lot of people, like how you talked about the publications and the difference, right? Like featured in Forbes, like, how many people are like, oh, I just need to be like featured in Forbes just to put it on my website, and does that actually, like it's
that does
kind of
nothing.
like vanity, right?
Yeah. Like it drives me crazy when I see people do that. Like, first of all, Forbes created this thing called the Coaches Council where you can like pay. It makes no sense to me, but a lot of people do it. You pay Forbes to write for them. So it's like you're paying for an advertisement just so you can say, I write for Forbes. But at the end of the day, if you ever do that, you can never really write for Forbes editorially. And that's not even really Forbes. Like it's another company licensing Forbes' name to make money. So it's like so many people get caught up in the I'm in Forbes. Well, at the end of the day, if it doesn't bring you any money and it only costs you money, like what's the point?
Yeah. Yeah, you're so right. So when it comes to deciding, okay, so obviously I want to look at local market because local market's going to be easier for me to break into if I'm not already nationally known. I'm looking at where my ideal audience is hanging out. Now, do I look at print versus video? Because I think there's obviously, again, different bang for your buck, as far as, okay, not all exposure is created equal,
Yeah.
right? Like maybe a TV commercial, and I say commercial, quote unquote, if you're actually going to be on a local news show, people see your face, people see you in person versus appearing as a quote in the print. Is there different way to that, or does it not matter?
No, it's completely different. Like if you're a local brick and mortar store, then you should focus on local news and not even worry about podcasts. But if you're somebody with an expertise and anybody can hire you at any time, anywhere, then you should 100% double down on podcasts and not even worry about local media. Because again, you have to keep in mind not you have to keep in mind the audience, but also like the attention span of the audience. I like podcasts for anybody who's an expert in anything, just because when people choose to listen to a podcast, they literally scroll through the app, they find one that they want to listen to, and they make an intention. Like it is their intention to listen to 30 minutes of that specific topic. It's very different from scrolling online and from like having the TV on in the background. So I think when you talk about engagement, podcasts are super important. But if you're local, then local media is big. If you only work with people locally where you live. So again, it all goes back to who is my client and what is my end goal. If your end goal is just to look cool, like maybe you don't, and I have had clients like this, like they don't need the money. They just want to look cool because maybe they want a book deal or whatever. I don't know. Like then join the Forbes Coaches Council, pay money for all this publicity and all this, like, I mean, it's kind of gray area, but if you just want to look cool and not make money, then do whatever. But if you actually want to turn the publicity into profit, then you need to be strategic. You need to pay attention to who your audience is. And it does work. Like if you do it strategically with that end goal in mind, you will get more customers, you will get more clients. And where a lot of people fall flat is they think they need the big media and they need to look cool. And once they look cool, then the money will follow. Well, it won't if you're not targeting the right people. You'll look cool to people who will never want to buy your product or service.
Yes, yes, absolutely. So I love that you love and obviously, of course, you love the podcast because you have your own podcast, which is, what's the name of your podcast?
It's called Become a Media Maven.
Love that. So you guys make sure to check that out. And what I think a lot of advertisers are realizing now is that with the podcast, you really have their ear, right? For half an hour. Like if you think about YouTube, like the average person watches YouTube video for like 2 minutes, maybe, social media, it's like what, 30 seconds. So yeah, so the podcast, you do have that advantage of having someone's attention for a longer period of time. And that definitely, I think people relate more. They think like they know you, right? I'm sure you've experienced that, where you meet somebody who listens to your podcast and they treat you like you're a friend of theirs because they feel that they actually know you because they hear you every single week. And so, yeah, so that leads to really close relationships. Now, to wrap things up, you did mention one of the biggest mistakes that people make is when they pitch, they go straight to promo. So how should we approach a pitch? Obviously, there's a science to that, as I can imagine. There's a right way and a wrong way to write a pitch. So what does the ideal pitch look like for you?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's so much on this. I can actually share a pitch with your audience, Anya. If you just go to podcastclout.com/Pat, that's an exact pitch that I've used to get on Pat Flynn's Smart Passive Income, like word for word, and you can take it there. But the big things are, don't write a press release. Press releases are long, boring, they're promotional. They worked in the 70s, they worked in the 80s, they don't work today. Like, don't write a press release because you think it makes you look more important. Like, nobody wants to read that. 2, keep it short, sweet, and to the point. like, and that's one. Another one, let the journalists know that you're only sending this pitch to them. I mean, you can pitch other journalists, but don't send one email to 50 people in the BCC at the same time. You know what I mean? Like say, hey, Anya, I really like your podcast for this reason. I loved this episode. Because of that, I think you might be interested in this topic. Your audience might be interested. Like, don't make it about you, make it about the audience, and include some talking points. Like, I can talk about this. I can talk about this. Like, give the podcaster ideas. Like when people pitch me and they say, oh, a marketing expert, they can talk about this, that, and the other. And it's just the generic marketing stuff you've heard over and over again. I'm like, but why? Like, we all know this stuff. Excuse the children screaming. Work from home life.
Wait till my kids come busting in.
I mean, it's just like, I get pitched by so-called marketing experts all the time. But if somebody pitched me and they said, I'm an expert in running Pinterest ads for people in the construction company, like, that's a pitch I've never received before. They're going to include specifics that most of us don't know about. So I'm going to book them. So you just want to give them something that makes them say, oh, wow, I've never seen this before. This is something that's super helpful to my audience. I want to learn more about this. So think about those kinds of topics when you're pitching.
100%. So you're right. So from my personal experience, as you said, as podcasters, we get pitches all the time of, hey, I have a perfect guest for you. Hey, I have a perfect guest for you. And you're right. It is, for me, I look at the person and right away I'm asking, how is this going to benefit my audience? And if that question is not answered or not easily answered, and I can't easily see how that's going to benefit my audience, for me, I'm sorry, no, but no. So it is all about how are you going to bring value to the audience of the outlet that you're pitching. And I think that's probably the most important thing that you can take away from today's conversation, right? It's not about you, make it about their audience.
Yeah. And then I think just one last thing to mention, because a lot of people don't do this. And not only is it bad for the media outlet, but it's bad for yourself. Like, you need to, when you do get the publicity, you need to be sharing it. So many people think, oh, I was on Anya's podcast, so everybody who listens, they know about me now. Well, that may be true, but in 5 minutes, they're going to forget about me. What I do every time I earn any exposure, and I tell my clients the same thing, take that link, take that clip, whatever it is, share it on social media, tag the journalist, the podcast host, the media outlet, and share it over and over and over again. Social media is a constantly moving feed, and you don't see most of what people post just because the algorithm doesn't think you want to see it. So like, put it in a scheduler and post it repeatedly in a bunch of different places, because even if people don't know about you in the podcast, they just see that I'm earning exposure. So then I get that credibility and authority bump just because they see I'm a guest on another podcast. And then you appreciate that because I'm sharing your podcast with other people. Like, you're really doing a disservice to yourself when you don't share the media that you've earned. And I have seen many, many times that a media outlet will refuse to cover my client because they will say, I've covered them before and they did not share what we did, so I'm not going to cover them again. It is so common because a lot of these journalists, like, their livelihood depends on people reading or watching or listening to what they're putting out. And if they're going to give you the time that you have on their platform and you don't even tell people about it, I mean, it's like the rudest thing. And so many people do it. It blows my mind.
I cannot agree more with you. Thank you for saying that. And sometimes it seems like the bigger the quote unquote celebrity, the harder it is to get them to promote it, right? Yet they want to be on your podcast, yet they want you to promote them. So 100% agree with you.
It makes me so mad. Like, there was a time when I was like, I don't even want to have guests on my podcast because they just want to use my platform and leave. They don't even want to share my episode with other people, which it's stupid for them. Right. Like, they could be getting so much more if they would share it, but they think, oh, I'll just use her audience and call it a day. Like, it's just rude.
Yes, 100% agree with you. So, Christina, thank you. Thank you so much for being here today and for sharing this information. I think every single business owner should be using the strategy of, you're essentially creating authority, right? And again, when you're building that authority through somebody else's word, through somebody else's perception of you, it's so much stronger than anything that you can say about yourself. And again, remember, promote it again, because people move on very quickly. So reuse it and reuse it and reuse it once you earn that. So, and start locally, and remember what's in it for their audience. I think if you take away those points, you'll be golden. So Christina, thank you so much for being on today. If somebody wanted to learn more about you and connect with you, how do we do that?
Oh my gosh, all the places. So on social media, I'm at Christina all day, so you can find me there. I shared the URL for that pitch. If you wanted to see the exact pitch, you can go to podcastclout.com/Pat. And my podcast is Become a Media Maven.
Amazing. So you guys make sure to check out Christina, and I hope to have you again on a future episode.
Thank you so much, Anya.
Thank you. Talk soon. Bye.